Okay, good afternoon, everybody. In case you were not aware, I think y'all can kind of pick up on it. I have come into contact with a situation, right, that has got me at home. I'm fine. I could go out and jog 10 miles if I needed to. I'm fine. But unfortunately, I am at home and I'm having to teach from home. But I didn't want you to miss out on this lesson because it's a really good lesson, and I wanted to make sure y'all got a good first-hand experience of it because it's going to be really, really important for the rest of really this section of history, this unit, and a lot of stuff on it that is going to be on the LEAP test. So without further ado, I thought we would get into it, and today we are talking about the build-up to World War II, appeasement. Okay, now, if you read in your bell ringer, I asked you the question of, basically, would you let somebody spit on your face for $1 million, right? And, of course, I had answers that were all over the place. Some yes, some no. Really, really different answers. Some of them were hilarious. Y'all did a really good job on some of them. And, of course, me, myself, for $1 million, yeah, I would. In fact, I don't think the number would have to be nearly that high. For myself, you just said you're going to take care of my kids' college, and I'd do it, right? Because, bottom line is I can survive that, but boy, it sure would make my kids' life a lot better. But everybody has their own different threshold, right? If you went to find somebody that was homeless, one of those people holding those cardboard signs, you wouldn't have to offer anywhere near $1 million, right? Probably for some of them, it's a good warm meal that night, right? If you ask Jeff Bezos, not for all the money in the world, right? He's too rich, he's too powerful. $1 million isn't going to change his life, right? But the whole purpose of that is we're talking about appeasement. What will you put up with, and at what price will you put up with it, right? So, appeasement is defined as to yield or concede to the belligerent demands of a nation, group, person, etc., in a conciliatory effort, sometimes at the expense of justice or other principles. Now, you will find as you're doing your self-paced lesson, I asked to what is an example of appeasement you have seen at school, something that was a rule that was not enforced or they stopped enforcing it, right? And a lot of people talked about hair color, that, initially they had cracked down, I guess it's before my time, that they'd really said they were going to crack down on hair color, and they kind of ended up backing off on that, right? They kind of pulled back, and now there's a lot of people that have some really shaky situation with hair color, right? So that's an example of appeasement, right? Where the rules were bucked and they just decided, we'll back up off the rules, right? Now, Hitler was definitely the guy to do that, right? He was the guy that would test the appeasement of the world, really. And he's immediately going to come in and he's going to say, you know what, forget the Treaty of Versailles. I am not paying those reparations, which there was no hope for Germany if they had continued to pay those reparations, right? We talked about it in class. Many of y'all comment on it. It was designed to make it so that Germany couldn't get back on its feet. So simply by removing the war reparations, it at least gave Germany a chance to get back on its feet. He then starts to rebuild the military. Again, that's a huge defiance to the Treaty of Versailles. And he's going to begin to cut down on unemployment by simply providing all those military jobs. And it appears that the German people, that Hitler has made good on his promise, and he is restoring German pride. Okay? So that's what appears to be the case. Now, the question I ask is, do you think it's important to have pride in your country? And if so, why or why not? And certainly you have to have a certain level of pride in your country, right? Enough to believe that it is worth fighting for and defending and so on and so forth. But there's always that fear of if you got too much pride in your country, then it starts getting into some murky water. It starts getting into a territory of, if you got too much pride, is it turning into, that from patriotism to hatriotism, right? Where it starts getting really violent, right? Now, as he begins to militarize, Japan is also starting to militarize. They realize, hey, Germany's doing it, we better do it too. And they're not the only ones, right? A lot of countries are starting to begin this second arms race, if you will, just like was building up with World War One. And they're all in a race to build up a military to deter from others attacking. And the question I would ask in class is, how does building up a nation's military create the pressure to use it? We're going to see this a lot during the Cold War, where you have this giant military, and there's this need, this feeling, if you will, that we have to show it off, right? Because otherwise it doesn't function as the deterrent that you want it to function as. And while this is going on, there's a lot of nationalism and imperialism. Again, the same factors that were creating the powder keg that led to World War I. And Europe has a long history of building empires, right? We were part of the English Empire. And of course, there's plenty of examples. Spanish Empire, the French do it, lots of empire building. And Germany feels like it was their turn, and they kind of got messed over and didn't get a chance to really build the empire that they felt like they had earned the right to build. So there's a lot of nationalism in Europe, and again, that's that ideal of not only that my country is great, but my country is better than your country, and we got to prove it, right? Like, not only is my country better, your country is bad for not being my country, right? And so, the question I asked in class is, here in America today, do you think we have enough nationalism, too much nationalism, or just the right amount, right? Because you got to have some nationalism, right? You have to have some belief that your country is again worth fighting for, worth protecting. There's something good to your country worth defending. You also don't want too much nationalism where you're fighting wars just to prove that your country is better than others. So there's a fine line, and I'm curious what y'all think. Where do we stand on that fine line? Now, Hitler had successfully begun to restore Germany's economy, and he wants to make good on his word to restore German pride. Remember, that's a key focus here, right? So he begins taking land that he saw was already belonging to Germany, right? The Rhineland, in his mind, that's German, right? They speak German, that's Germany, right? So he's going to go ahead and take the Rhineland. Now, this is a huge violation of the Treaty of Versailles, but again, nobody's doing anything. In fact, they had given orders to the German troops as they go to take the Rhineland. Look, if you encounter French forces, you need to pull back. The French don't even fight them for it. They don't even try. And so they really go in there and take the Rhineland unopposed, right? So despite violating every core tenet of the treaty, the U.S. and Europe do nothing to respond. Now, why do you think the U.S. and Europe do nothing as a response to Hitler? Well, the big answer to that question is they're not in a position to, right? We're dealing with a depression. Europe's dealing with a depression. In addition to that, especially in Europe, a lot of heavy battles had happened in a lot of these European countries. They're rebuilding. And no one particular country wants to take on that kind of heat to have to go defend Europe against Germany. So it's one of those situations where they're just kind of like, let him have it, right? Just let him have it. Maybe he'll stop there. This image I ask y'all to hashtag or drop an image with. The question I kind of ask in class and I kind of begin to facilitate discussion is, who is the author of this picture? And some of y'all might notice it looks really familiar. Well, that's Dr. Seuss. Of course, you can see he's kind of signed his name right there. That's the same Dr. Seuss from, Cat in the Hat, One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish, Horton Hears a Who. Same guy, right? Same, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. And then I would ask, well, who is this monster that's in the picture? And, of course, those are the Nazis, right? So he's doing a political cartoon showing Nazis as the monster. If you look at this guy's shirt, it says the Appeaser. So it's representing appeasement of the Nazis, right? To just let them have this land. And it says, remember, one more lollipop and then you all go home. Basically, you could tell looking at this picture, they're not going to go home. They're eventually about to eat the guy. And so this cartoon is really representative and indicative of this feeling that, look, by appeasing these Nazis, you're letting them build to be a bigger monster. And eventually it's going to be a monster that devours you, right? Of course, that's the activity that is to be done, is to post an image. Now, For the Japanese, they also are taking land. They're going to start taking Manchuria. They're really going to go into the eastern portion of East Asia, where the Great Wall is, portions of Mongolia, and they're going to begin to expand. They drop out of the League of Nations, and they're going to begin to expand even further. And by the way, Thursday, make sure you stay tuned. You show up to class. Got a great episode for Thursday. So why is it so important for Japan to take land? And of course, the answer that I'm really looking for out of this is they're a tiny island. They don't have a lot of resources. Resources. That's the name of the game, right? Most wars are fought for resources, and this would be no different. Japan needs things like oil and iron and all the machinations you need to really engage in war. That's not in abundance on the island of Japan, and they know that. They need that stuff, right? So again, this is another political cartoon you might see on the test, hint, hint. And you will notice a soldier, and of course he's to represent Japan. He's got these Japanese flags, and he's carving up China, showing that Japan is in fact carving up China. Now, Germany sees no one is doing anything about this, right? Europe's not doing anything. America's not doing anything. And the kind of example I use is, it is sort of like, if you ever see the little kid and they sneak up to the candy dish and they get one little piece of candy and they look around and nobody is stopping them. So they go, okay, I'm going to get another little piece of candy. And they get two pieces of candy. And again, they got their head on a swivel. They're looking around. Nobody's coming. And then they start, they start tearing in like Cookie Monster, right? Because they eventually realize, like, man, nobody's doing anything. I might as well just kill this candy, right? Germany is doing a lot of that, right? They start tiptoeing around, to what extent can we violate this treaty and they not do anything? And very soon they're going to realize, man, we do whatever we want. They're not going to do anything. They begin to take Austria, Sudetenland, and eventually they even take and invade their recent ally of Poland. Now, if you remember back, I asked you, what do you think Germany will do next? Remember, the first thing Germany is worried about is that border with Russia. Remember, that's why they made that alliance with the Ottoman Empire, right? You got to worry about fighting that war on two fronts. This time they're going to do something different. In kind of this clandestine, in backroom alley situation, they're going to make this treaty with Russia, right? And the whole purpose of it is, hey, we'll give you some of Poland. In return, we want to be able to buy some of this oil because we really need oil. And while this is going on, other nations are kind of looking the other way because, again, they're dealing with their own depression. Now, this cartoon is quite often featured on U.S. history tests, so make sure you're aware of it. This is Adolf Hitler right here, and this is Joseph Stalin. Of course, that's the leader of Russia. This is the leader of Russia. That's the leader of Germany. Now, you'll notice they have a gun behind their back, and this is kind of this is a very uneasy alliance, right? Neither one really trusts the other. They know that at some point in time, the other one is going to betray them, and they're aware of that, right? So they're going to make sure that they kind of keep their, it's one of those, they're keeping their friends close and their enemies closer type situation. So either one of them at any point in time will betray the other. And of course, you can see the countries getting stepped on in this is Poland. Now, Japan and Germany both want to conquer and take as much land as possible. And again, this is a race to secure those resources. Europe and the U.S. will continue to do nothing. They'll sign a treaty, one of them will violate it, they'll sign another treaty, and they'll just violate it some more. Japan is particularly cruel to the territory they take. And again, I cannot stress this enough. I can't recreate what was about to happen Thursday, so make sure you tune in on Thursday. Probably it'll be me from home, but hopefully I'll be in class. Now, with too much appeasement and too much ignoring of these two nations, they're starting to get really big, right? The pig is getting fat, if you will, right? And they're becoming really ambitious. And now every country is starting to say to themselves, hey, we got to start making alliances, start getting ready, because potentially we might be back into another war, right? You got your entangled alliances. And again, I kind of ask the question, it's shocking how many of y'all will poll this and say that you're expecting there to be another world war. It's really shocking how many of y'all would say that. And again, the end is going to end with a time to climb. So that's going to do it. Obviously, it's a lot quicker when I am not stopping and facilitating a discussion, but that's kind of the 15-minute rundown of what was going on in class today. So that was it. I kind of walked you through the lecture. It's a quick little 15-minute. You can use that as a supplement to fill out your Nearpod that I'm going to assign for you to do at home. And, of course, that way, hopefully, you'll be caught up and ready to go for tomorrow. So that is going to do it for me today, and I will see y'all in class probably virtually tomorrow. Well, it'll be virtually. So that's it, and y'all have a great afternoon. Stay home, stay safe, and take care.